How's everybody this morning? Yeah? We got a little bit of sun, right? Felt a little bit better. The wind felt like it died down a few notches. And I'm glad to see everybody here. As Maribel said, it's always a fun night, poker night. And it's actually a pretty good lead into what I'm going to be talking about with data. For those of you who play real poker games and blackjack games, it's all about numbers. It's all about data. And I'm going to share with you some of those things. But to give you the 30-second background of where I came from, I started my career as a CTO in startups, primarily in media, but also went on to other industries, including biosciences and travel. I did my first pivot about 12 years ago and left the world of startups and left the world of being a CTO and became a CIO, doing transformation work, largely at organizations that had customer-facing technologies. So Business Week magazine was my first one, a construction data company was my second one, and then a market research firm in the financial services space was my third one. And then last year, as Maribel said, I did another pivot. I've decided to finish a book, publish my book, which is Driving Digital. We'll talk a little bit about that during the talk. And go off on my own and help other organizations implement their digital transformation programs. So I want to start this morning picturing what you were doing 10 years ago. So about 10 years ago, I had just become the CIO at Business Week magazine. I was chartered to help them really go from a print world really into a digital world. They were starting to feel the impacts of digital advertising and trying to figure out how to grow their digital advertising business. They were starting to feel the impact of subscribers leaving the print subscription world and going off to the digital world. And this is one of the pages that we were hosting. This is the technology section from September of 2017. And I ask you the question, look at it closely and think about what you see that probably isn't right, that looks wrong, that maybe needs something that needs changing if we were going to do this today. And usually when I ask this question, oh, you got an answer for me.
I think I have an observation anyway. I don't know if it's an answer. No ads.
What's that?
No ads.
No ads. Yeah, that's a problem. How do you make money on a page that has no ads? In fact, some people who have answered the question said, that BlackBerry ad looks weird. It should be a little bit more pronounced. But in fact, it wasn't an ad. It's a story. Right? And it's about BlackBerry going Wi-Fi. So we really got that one wrong. And we got AOL's mobile ambition. We got that one wrong. We have a talking car. We were short-sighted around that story. But that's really not the real issue with this particular page. The problem with this page was that nobody went to it. Okay? And the problem with that was our editor, our technology editor, spent most of his day curating and placing the content that went on this page so that Google could spider it. And the problem was, even though we had Omniture at that time and had all the analytics to tell us this, nobody was looking at the analytics and saying, we're wasting 30% of a key editor's time looking at this page and figuring out that AOL should be the top placed article. And so we looked at that as a technology group and said, we need to fix this. This isn't smart. This isn't a good use of our time. It isn't good use of our editor's time. And over the next year, we put out an updated publishing platform that was largely based on algorithms. So what were people looking at? What did people need to see on this page? What was in the editor's mindset in terms of what decisions they made to put articles up in certain slots? And this particular page was 100% automated. Freed up the editor to go out and create more and better content. And that's one of the things that we did at Business Week. So this is my example of no data or no use of data. It creates inefficiencies. It creates bad decision making. It makes your product really not aligned with what customers are looking for. Most of our customers at that time, most of our readers either went to the homepage and found an article or did a Google search and ended up right on the article. They never ended up on this page. So this is the story of no data. And it turns out that if you spend time with many leaders today, this is coming from a survey, asking CEO what they think is most important, becoming data-driven is very high on the list. They may have the same struggles getting their management team to understand that. They may have the same struggles trying to make sense out of data. But if you look at the 5 things on this list, they're all pretty much equal. They're all looking to become data-driven. When you look at what they're looking to invest, data and analytics, and you really need those things before you get to cognitive technologies, these are things that they're looking to spend money on because they know it's competitive in every industry to leverage data. And then finally, this is the one that I thought took me by surprise. They understand that data quality is an issue, okay? If you're making decisions off of bad data in their ERP or in your CRM and it looks wrong, they know the consequences of that. So they're already telling us we need quality data, we need quality analytics, we need to understand what we're looking at and be able to make decisions off of it. So what is the number one tool that all of us still use day to day to make our decision making? And that our finance team uses to put out reports from our ERP and our sales teams use to put out reports out of their CRM. It's largely done in spreadsheets. And you can have big data in your enterprise, you can have all the analytics in your world, but when most of the analysis and the work being done is being done in spreadsheets, we have a problem. So I'm going to illustrate what this looks like. A few years ago, an academic professor got her hands on a corpus of spreadsheets from a single company, and she did an analysis over what does this look like when I look at 100,000, let me get the exact number. It's 15,000 spreadsheets that she looked at from a period of time from one company, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you build up and look at the number of worksheets that were in this environment, there were 80,000 worksheets, and now we're dealing with a lot, okay? Now, in addition to, of the 15,000 spreadsheets, 9,000 of them had code in them, right? We don't call spreadsheets code, but when you look at a formula and some of the crazy formulas that we put in pivot tables and other things that we put in there, it's basically code. And of those 9,000 spreadsheets, there were 900,000 unique formulas in these spreadsheets. A lot of code, a lot of analytics. And then she took this analysis one step further and said, is this stuff good? And what she found was of the 9,000 spreadsheets, roughly a quarter of them, 2,200, had basic calculation errors. Now, these are not formula errors. These are not putting out bad results. These are things that would, if this were in the software world, would be defects, things that are wrong. And the company that she was analyzing was Enron, okay? Now, I don't know if that really is what brought down Enron. I don't think that's causation here. Okay, but in every organization that I've worked in, particularly data companies, I've worked in 2 of them, they still use, and we still use a lot of spreadsheets out there. And this, I believe, is a barrier for all of us to becoming more data-driven, more automated, more real-time, more intelligent. Not only is it being done across our organization, this is a study done by IDC in terms of the amount of money wasted on spreadsheets, largely around the recomputation that's done month over month to reproduce the same reports with new data. So if you are in a 1,000 employee company, you're probably losing $800,000 a year just on the time wasted in building spreadsheets. So, got big data problems out there. We have lots of small data problems out there. And in my view, the solution around this is not just about data scientists, and it's not just about putting big data technologies in and analytics and self-service BI technologies. It's going back to the source of the problem. We have people in our organization who have been doing analysis with data for a long time, ever since Lotus 123 came out. The tools are outdated, the technologies are outdated, the practices are outdated, and the problems are bigger. All right, and so, you know, I had a team of data scientists working with me at a construction data company. It was never enough, right? And so when you look at whatever level of talent pool you have, what, you know, PhDs, 15 PhDs. I guarantee you there's data that you're leaving on the table that you can't get to because they should be solving the biggest, most important problems for you. And there's a class of problems that they're just not going to get to. So my solution around this is around arming what I call citizen data scientists. And that's just a fancy word of saying data analysts and business analysts that work in your organization. I told you I'd bring you back to the book. This is a recipe that I'm going to share from my book, Driving Digital. I wrote the book because as a CIO for 10 years in 3 organizations, I found that there were certain practices that were integral, core practices that every business that I had done transformation with required to be able to run and execute and use technology in different ways. It starts with the customer and having a better idea of what their values are, what their needs, what their alternatives are, what new segments that you can target, and even in some cases, what new markets you can target. It requires a new partnership with sales and marketing to be able to listen and get voice of customers and to do market research. That gets into, as a CIO, how you're running the office of the CIO and what projects you're taking on and how you're managing your portfolio. And so I talk to a lot of CIOs that still have a very heavy balance of compliance-oriented projects or even projects that are aimed at cost savings and other operational improvements. But to me, digital is about the customer, it's about growth, it's about new markets, and it's new products. And you have to find the time to rebalance your portfolio to be able to handle those types of projects. Many of you are doing more application development than you were doing 5 years ago. How many people can say that? More application development than you were probably doing 5 years ago, about a third of the room. So the practices that you are doing inside your corporation around software development needs to start taking and borrowing ideas from actual software companies, and that's agile and DevOps. We're going to talk a lot about big data and data science, so I'll leave that out. But when you talk about digital driving IoT or AI or blockchain, it seems to be different by industry. Having an agile practice and having a data practice, in my opinion, are prerequisites to being able to take advantage of emerging technologies. And then lastly is about the workforce enablement. It's about getting analysts outside of the IT group to be more self-serving. You can do that with data. You can do that with applications. You can do that with low-code platforms and no-code platforms. But it's all about making sure that you're bringing the entire organization around for the ride. And this is essentially what I cover in the book. It's a collection of recipes that go into every one of these subjects that you can use in your organization. So I'm going to share the data one today. And this is essentially the data practice that I put in the book around getting people outside of your core data science teams to participate. It has 4 parts to it, okay? It needs to start with the decision makers. The decision makers are probably looking at spreadsheets, PDFs, and PowerPoints today to make their decisions. So I don't care what tools you have. I want to get them more immersed in understanding how to use tools to look at the results that they want. Second thing is around cultivating data scientists. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Third thing is I think technologies are very important. There's a lot of data technologies out there, from self-service to data prep to data quality to data governance to ETL, all these different buzzwords, big data, Cloudera, all the different big data platforms out there. You need to find the ones that make sense for the type of data and the type of analysis that you're doing. And as a CIO and now running a consulting organization, I see lots of different good technologies put out there. You have to find the ones that are right for you. And then balancing all this is a data governance program. Okay, and this is answering questions like, who has access to what data and what they can use it for? What does this data mean? What analysis has somebody completed that can be repurposed? What are some of the underlying data quality issues with the data that you're looking at? These are all parts of data governance practices, and you could see as more people are doing more analysis and more decision makers are using data, you need that practice to back that up. So let's go into that a little bit more. You probably have one of the systems listed here, and all of these systems have existing reporting. So I walk in as a CIO, I find out they have dynamics in the office. We're using the ERP. We're using the CRM. I find out nobody is looking at the underlying data. There's one sales ops person going in there. There's one finance person going there, pulling the data out and putting into spreadsheets and putting into PowerPoints. And that's what we're looking at a at a management meeting. And we're looking at data that's 1 month old. Okay, that's a problem. So before you even get into what is my solution and how do I get data scientists involved and how do I get BI programs in place that aggregate all this stuff, you have to start at the top and get people used to using the data in the systems of record to look at the data and use that in their decision making. It's going to be clunky. I think somebody yesterday talked about how people hate the solutions coming out of their enterprise technologies. They're going to hate it. They're not going to like the experience, but you need to create that demand. And you need to get the executives in particular used to looking at data solutions if you're going to fuel this change of behavior in your organization. So that's the part where I think is important working with your executives. Second thing is around technologies and tools. This is the answer to what am I going to do instead of a spreadsheet? And my simple answer is you're going to put a repeatable tool, a dashboard, and an analysis that's self-serving in front of a group of people that they're going to go out and use to go and look at data. This is an example of one that I just use on my blog. I use it for looking at what types of content people read when I put it up in the first 60 days and what types of content do people look at 60 days plus. It's a very common analysis in media so that we understand the difference between usage around green content versus content that's closer to news. But these are the types of dashboards that I look for people to create because they're live, they're clickable, they're looking at real-time data, they're intuitive. People do get excited over them. They do require some training of people to know how to use these tools and a lot of training in terms of how do you know what dashboards to actually go create. You just don't throw data up there and expect people to use it. These dashboards have to be created with a question in mind. What types of problems is it trying to solve for? And it requires a systematic thinking in terms of how you're going to process your data. But the main thing here is getting a repeatable analytics solution in front of key executives that they can use to drill into data. This is a piece that is a little hard for me to explain in one slide or in a talk, but very often I'm rolling out these citizen data science programs with early adopters within every one of the organizations that I work with. Very often that's either an operations or a marketing department. In the marketing department, they're used to dozens of SaaS solutions. They're all putting out different reports. And the marketer's trying to figure out, how do I spend my next batch of money on reaching my clients? Am I going to do it on social? Am I going to do it on SCM? And they're getting reports from 5 different places and trying to make sense of it all. And then the CMO comes in and says, I need a consolidated report. Okay, so when I hear those things, I say, let me give you a tool that will help you build a consolidated report around this. I hear the same thing from the finance department. They're now working with PayPal and other e-commerce solutions, and they're trying to consolidate and figure out, how do I close the end of the end of the month with all this data coming in from different providers? Got 5 different SaaS solutions and 3 different payment platforms that we're using. Again, crunching through numbers every month on spreadsheets. How do we get that out of that? Bring that data into an environment where it's centralized and let them go build tools around it that help them solve those problems. So it starts with underserved departments. It starts with developing relationships with the people, the leaders of those departments, understanding what types of problems they're solving. Find the super user, the person who's probably doing all the number crunching. I think somebody yesterday called them the mule. Okay, so find those people. Those are your users that you're trying to outfit with a new practice and a new technology. Define standards for them. Okay, so when you give, what's the difference between a data scientist and a spreadsheet jockey? Okay, that's a term I've used on my blog to talk about people who are just chunking out more and more spreadsheets. The person doing business analysis needs some of the technical skills that your software developers have. How do they version the dashboard that they're using? How do they put out documentation around it? Who's testing it, right? So if I put out a dashboard and it's going to go to the CEO, is somebody going to go look at the data and do QA on it, right? These are the things that you need as a CIO or as an executive working in data to think about if you're going to start putting self-service tools out there, because again, the data quality matters. This is the heart of the data governance that goes into formulating these programs. And the way I like to explain it is, if I want more of my organization using my data, what do I need my technology teams to do different and better than they were doing in the past? So I might have had a DBA looking at a database and making sure it's up, it's backed up, it's performing reasonably well, its table spaces aren't getting filled up, all the natural physical issues that a DBA has to take care of. I then go in to ask the DBA and say, how do I cut 5 different data sets and provide them to marketing, finance, and operations so that they can do self-service data? And it's like my head is spinning when I talk to them about this, right? How do they provide access to this? Are they giving them direct access to the table? Are they virtualizing these tables? Who gets access and what are the policies around them? What's the overall data quality? Are there data dictionaries that go into them? These are all the things that technologists understand that they need to have as services in order to provide that data to their organization. I also have to teach the business how to work with this data in a way that's sustainable. So when they create a formula, it's not going to be one of the 900,000 formulas in a spreadsheet that nobody knows about. Somebody needs to put a name on it. Somebody has to define that formula, what does it do and how does it calculate it, and has to put a life cycle around it. If we change the formula and that's calculating a % of revenue or some other KPI, people need to know that the KPI's values have changed. If I put data visualizations out, now I got a user experience issue. I might have 10, 20 dashboards that are accessible to my head of sales, and they look different, and they have different color schemes, they have different uses of bar charts and pie charts and things like that, because 5 different people created them, right? So we know if we did that with our websites, our users would be really upset. They wouldn't understand how to work with that user experience. The same thing happens with your data visualization. So just some of the things to be aware of when you start putting these things out, is many of the things that were core technology practices are now becoming practices that you have to instill in business users. This is how I represent the entire flow in the book. And so, yes, you have to do a little bit of all 4 of these things in parallel, right? Find technologies, engage executives, find the new data analysts that you can work with and instill new governance. But what you find as you do a little bit of both, of all 4 of those things in parallel, is that they feed on each other, right? Give the head of sales access to the CRM and tell them they can only get data directly from the system, and they're going to ask a lot more questions. That's a good problem to have. You want them asking questions, and you want them fueling the demand for more activity and more analysis to be done. Give the data scientists a little bit more freedom. They're going to ask more questions. They're likely to need more practices, sometimes more technologies, to be able to go fulfill them. Put more technologies out there. Hopefully that's helping you to start address some of the underlying automation that you need to do to make this work, some of the underlying data quality that you need to support to improve your practices. And so in the book, I took a lot more about how to put this in place and run all 4 streams in parallel to see this effect of one feeding off into the other. And the heart of that is running this in an agile practice. Okay, I can't go into that in itself, but in software, we think about a user story that's telling you, what does the end user need, why do they need it, what benefit is it serving them, and what constraints is it serving them. In an agile data practice, you do the same thing with data questions. I'm going to ask a question: how much sales have we done on a particular product line over the last year? I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to ask the next question and say, why is that important? And when you know that piece of data, what are you going to do with it to make or improve that line of business? All right, and so you can put an agile practice right on your data and analytics practices. So what are the results? What I'm describing here, if you go do more research on it, they call it the democratization of data. It's a big fancy word. What that basically means is make data more accessible to more people in your organization so that they can self-serve, discover, do the analysis over it, and be able to be productive decision makers. And so what you see here, it may be a little hard to see on the graph up there. 4 bar charts. The top blue is companies that are more democratic. The bottom gray are people who are undefined, and the middle ones are more top-down or managerial-oriented cultures. And I circled the things that interest me the most. Remember what I said, that digital transformation needs to include the part about how you're interfacing with customers, putting out new products and services, and growing revenue. Okay, so it's not just about automation, it's not just about workforce improvements, it's not just about productivity. You're all in competition with a new set of startups, with a new set of competitors entering your space. You need to think like magazines and newspapers did 20 years ago. How am I going to grow my subscription base in this very competitive world? And so when you look at the results of this one study, we use information to identify new business opportunities. That's a very important thing. That's growth. We use data as a revenue generator, right? Companies putting APIs out and APIs as services, and then finding out that there's an ecosystem of players who want to leverage your data. Sometimes you can use that to barter data that you don't have. Sometimes you can actually sell it as a revenue stream. That's a new source of revenue for companies that putting out or IoT or can do an AI analysis and sell that to a new group of constituents. So this is, to me, what brings it all together, right? So you got a new data practice, you're going beyond big data into your teams and getting them more useful with data, and now you're solving fresh data problems that help you grow revenue. How does this all come together? This is not simply putting new technologies out. There's significant organizational change, so you need to pace through this to make it successful. I think agile is still the heart of this. Remember, your technology selections are important, so go do pilots and do POCs and get to know your vendors and get to know what capabilities they are. But most importantly, understand the development community around the technologies that you're picking and understand the skill sets that you have to adopt to be able to use those things. Across every business, I think, that is working on digital transformation, I think winning with data and analytics is a core component to it. Again, that's a piece of my book. Other chapters in the book are around agile, DevOps, data platforms, building out a product management discipline, and probably the most important chapter, redefining the culture in the C-suite, ready for transformation. So with that, I think I have a minute left for some questions. Thank you. Oh, boy. Yeah, I knew Tim was going to come at me.
So Isaac, this all looks great on paper and in your book. But out there, I mean, when you talk about agile, there are still a lot of companies doing the bimodal approach. You know, they're struggling with legacy on that end. So what would your suggestion be in terms of those first steps? Is it a minimum viable approach, or, you know, do you see this bimodal in happening here as well? I mean, there's a lot of spreadsheets out there.
Yeah. So, you know, bimodal actually is a really good way to start, right? Because by definition, most organizations have an existing support practice on top of their legacy systems. It's often ticket-based, it's often infrastructure-based, and that's how they're going about their normal business. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to have to do some new things. You know, so where do most organizations tend to start with agile? It's when they're doing something new, it's a new technology, it's a new product, it's a new application, and it's a great place to foster that agile practice, get it instituted with a group of people, get the right tooling in place, get the right roles and responsibilities in place, and run bimodal for a period of time, right? Then, as you are building up that portfolio of new applications, and you're sitting there as the CIO, you're looking at that bimodal world and saying, I need to start addressing my legacy. I need to start shrinking my spend against the legacy. I need to start shrinking my footprint around legacy technologies. I need to start leveraging the skill set I have of people who are in that world, who are getting antsy, and have to bring them over into the world of, here's the new way we're going to do technology, and here's the new way of doing development practices. So that's where bimodal really gets challenged, and you have to start working with people and educating them how to start leveraging agile practices. But it doesn't happen overnight, and you can start slowly to build that up.
But you need those short wins to convince the business side that this is a viable approach, correct?
Absolutely, right? And it's not uncommon when I talk to people about agile that it starts off very much as a technology practice. So technologists working as a collaborative team. We call it multidisciplinary because it's web developers and database developers and all the people that need to make software work. But a true agile practice is going to have business people involved with it, not just as a product owner, which is common, but even within the group of the team, right? So some groups practice UAT, user acceptance testing. Why isn't that person on the team with the development group practicing that with every sprint? So I think that's a big part of it. Once I would do that faster than trying to get legacy technology supported on Agile, because that business and IT alignment is really what makes it progress. And if you let it run Agile for too long as an IT practice, you never get that synergy.
Okay, we get 2 more quick questions. Spencer?
Yes, your point about self-service, it really resonates with us. I want to say 5-6 years ago, we made a decision that IT needs to get out of the data business because we simply did not have the depth of knowledge for various areas, from online SEO to search engine type data all the way through internal Salesforce and et cetera. So we got into the business of creating data warehouses, Click with all sorts of data and providing that to the business. And that's worked pretty well because they really have the expertise, they have the analysts to go after the right data, analysis and so forth. The new problem we have is the proliferation of tools at the business level. So from real-time analytics with Ultrix to Domo to name it, it just goes Tableau on. And we really don't have a way to control that because it's working for them. I don't know if you've seen that in other organizations, perhaps.
Well, I think every department and every person in that department has a tolerance for how many different applications and screens that they will become versatile in. For many salespeople, it's one. It's called the CRM. And if you want to get something in front of most salespeople, it better be embedded in that CRM. It better be embedded in the mobile experience for that CRM. And maybe they'll go to a second tool to go look at analytics, right? So there's a separation today, I think, that you can achieve between the capabilities that you're trying to bring your organization and the front ends and the platforms that they're using to consume it. If you asked me that question 5 or 10 years ago, achieving that was difficult. I think companies like Salesforce blazed the way around those things. But Salesforce may not be accessible to everybody, right? It's still a big development platform. It's still an relatively expensive platform. I use the word citizen data scientists. There are low-code platforms out there that will enable your development teams to be more productive and put these screens out that can immerse lots of capabilities into it and make that accessible to different parts of the organization. And as a architect around this, you have to have that end user in mind and say, how do I give them a complete experience in a reasonable number of platforms with a reasonably consistent user experience? Otherwise, you're going to lose their interest and lose adoption over time.
Okay, last question.
So mine isn't so much a question as a comment and a response to a lot of the things we've been hearing leading up to this. Yesterday, there was a comment that the driver for digital transformation needs to come from the top down. I just heard you brilliantly say, no, it has to come from the bottom up, which is what I felt strongly yesterday. My experience has been exactly those, what you called citizen data scientists. I call them my data champions. We have been able to successfully drive digital transformation, the awareness of the power of data, because I go into a department and I go, so you wanted to answer a question? What was your business question? To speak to platforms, it was very, very difficult for me as the person who was doing data management to say, okay, fine, you can have it in Salesforce. Okay, fine, you can have it in Excel.
Just not the PDF in an email.
Right. So we have been able to drive that data literally from the bottom up by finding those people who were sick and tired of having to present to the top level, to the C-suite, with data that they weren't 100% sure of, that literally took them a month to put together one report. You find those people. They're tired. They want to get more creative, and let them drive it. Let them take it. And they will take it. They'll lead you to the technologies you need to use. Now, do you need a technology person? Sure, because you need to understand if that platform will really work, and then it'll take the company where you want to go.
Excellent. All right. I like the sharing. This is great. All right. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.